5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I've got a really quick riff today on the illusion of the self-made man. There's a really prevalent idea, particularly in Western culture, in the whole entrepreneurial kind of corporate business space. You see this a lot in some of the kind of business startup tech world celebrities we have. That notion of the self-made man. I made myself. I am the one responsible for all of my success. And I want to just riff on this a little bit and dig into what we really mean by that. And ultimately, I'm going to just make the case that no one is actually self-made, and I think a little humbling in that regard could go a long way. Right, so let's take a really easy example of this, where for a lot of individuals who are successful or who feel whole and complete, like they've accomplished something, their ability to think, write, and speak has been fundamental to that process, right? You can't lead people, you can't create content, you can't really do anything without your ability to language and convey your ideas to others or to the world. And here we come to the first question, right? Did you teach yourself how to speak? No, you were taught. You were taught in school by teachers, by your parents, by a bunch of people. You could take that even a step further back and be like, well, did you create the language that you speak, which helps you frame all of your thoughts, which helps you relate to others in the world? No, that was developed and refined over hundreds of and thousands of years. So your most fundamental orientation to the world, you didn't make. So taking credit for the things that came as a result of that ability, it's kind of cheeky. That's kind of cheeky. Here's another example. As you had the luxury of going through school and maturing and pursuing the goals that you wanted and accomplishing the things that you did you produce all the food that you grew? Which, of course, you couldn't achieve any of the success that you've had if you were dead. And food is a fundamental part of keeping you alive. So your food was absolutely necessary to your success, but you never made any of it. And in fact, you relied on a global agricultural system to produce the food that came from a bunch of regions around the world, right? We have an incredibly rich diet nowadays, right? I'm here in Toronto, Canada, and we get food regularly from California, from across the oceans, right? Which is thousands and thousands of people playing a part in each meal that you receive. So you can't really take credit for that. So again, there are these, upon digging a little further, there are all these blocks and examples where it's like, oh, well, you didn't really do that. You can take this a little more esoteric and be like, when did you decide to do all of this stuff? This is the classic do you do it or does it do you argument, where, you know, when you decide to close your hand, when did you decide to close your hand? You didn't. You kind of just made the decision. And you can take that for everything that you do. When did you decide to be interested in business? When did you decide to be interested in art? You didn't. It just spontaneously emerged through you. And to take credit for things that happen mostly involuntary is an awkward dynamic, to say the least, because it's actually incredibly difficult and arguably impossible to take credit for things that you didn't do voluntarily. The things you do consciously, and there's even a whole argument of the things that come up for you consciously, are a very, very small factor in the person and the man that you have become. And so it's extremely difficult to take credit. This notion of the self-made man is just almost a little bit immature. It's a little bit short-sighted because there's no argument where it can be fundamentally true, right? There's no argument where you have done everything in your life. And maybe you can make the argument, well, you know, I'm living on a farmland and I do grow all of my food and I teach my kids and I steward the next generation myself. And so in that way, I'm the self-made man. But where did you learn those techniques to grow your food? Did you come up with them spontaneously, or did you learn them from the epic, endless number of ancestral generations that have come before you who have learned the cultivation of food and wisdom and excitement and joy? right? You stand always on the shoulders of history. You're a byproduct and a funneling forward of the arc of the evolution of humanity. And it's very difficult to take credit for anything in your life when it comes from untold thousands of ancestral lineages. And I'm not saying, part of my job now, the way I make money is actually helping individuals cultivate their own sovereignty, right? Actually taking charge for your life and taking responsibility for it and cultivating as much sovereignty and individual capacity as possible. But none of that is to say that there is a valid claim somewhere that you've done all of this by yourself. Even all wisdom traditions and mystery schools worth their salt are built around the teacher-disciple or the master-pupil dynamic, right? Even in these most fundamental schools of thought, right? The wisdom and the performance and the capacity to perform comes from a dynamic involving many people, often involving an entire school. You're a part of a community, you're part of a sangha, whatever it is, but you exist as a fundamental part of everything that's going on, and you can't just simply claim that you've done all of it. I'm not trying to belittle everyone here, but actually a dash of humility in all of this is incredibly useful, because you just kind of look silly when you get up saying that you're responsible for everything that you've accomplished, because you're not. And it's actually discounting A, the effectiveness of civilization, B, the effectiveness of humanity, and C, just the reality of existence at large. You are not actually responsible for very much that you've done. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? That's just an acknowledgement of fact. And the only reason that there might be a pang of guilt or frustration or annoyance in hearing that is because it's a truth that you don't want to sit with, right? In some way it feels like you're giving up your power and that you're not capable of anything. That's not what we're conveying here, but it's just a reality that you stand on the shoulders of giants, whether you'd like to accept it or not. You're a part of humanity, you are not separate from it. You're a part of the world, you are not separate from it. This is another perfect example, right? Just like we proved that you need food to live in order to have any sort of accomplishments in your life, you also need the sun, you also need the biosphere, you also need water, you also need air. Fundamental elements of nature are necessary, are prerequisites for any accomplishment that you'd have in your life. And you didn't do any of those. You didn't create the sun, you didn't create the world around you, you didn't do anything to deserve it. It was all just given to you, and it is a absolute necessity to have in order to become anything that you can call making yourself. And so this is just worth considering. It's something I don't think gets voiced enough in this space, is that this notion of the self-made man is just an illusion. It's just a coping mechanism. It's something we use to comfort ourselves, giving us that sense of self-importance, that sense of self-agency, that I am doing good because I've done this all myself. But there's absolutely nothing wrong in saying, well, I have done this as part of a unit. There's nothing wrong with being part of humanity, being part of the evolution of nature and being itself. It's actually very empowering. You can be both the little drop of water and the ocean itself. Both are beautiful, and they're interdependent on one another. The ocean needs drops need ocean to be part of that category. So that's really all I wanted to riff on now, this illusion of the self-made man, and how it's just not a useful frame to present, because for those who can take 5 seconds to reason through it, you're just talking nonsense. It's just not fundamentally true. And so why bother saying it at all if it's not true, right? None of this takes away any of your power, any of your worth, any of your value. It's just an acknowledgement of the reality of the situation. And actually, when you acknowledge that you are part of a group, that motivation, that intrinsic desire to be a collective and help steward the collective comes a lot more naturally, because you recognize that the collective is necessary for you, just as you are necessary for the collective. So that's what I've got. Let me know what you think about that. Have you considered yourself a self-made man or individual? Does this resonate? Is it right? Is it wrong? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more of this, there is a subscribe button somewhere. It's a half a second action. It is super helpful. And I will see you here for the next one.